Morning. My name is Susan Garrison, and I've been introduced, but I feel a little bit of a need to introduce myself in this format to you. You see, I am basically a storyteller. I believe in the power of stories. And I think when we are most vulnerable, like we are now, our stories speak to us so strongly. When we're children, we're particularly vulnerable to stories. And cultures have always known that. Why they write and create and tell stories. Later, they would put them on television or show them over and over again in movie theaters. Stories influence us. Stories speak to us in a way that we cannot totally understand or believe. They are filled with archetypes like old men in polka dot ties and rivers. Locations, people, places, sequences are all in the stories. America has gone through very trying times. And as is trying times do, trying times make you look deeply into your stories. And so today, while we're in these trying times, I'd like us to look deeply at some stories that were influential in our lives. We were taught some golden lessons from those stories, lessons that carried us through our youth, through our young adulthood, and maybe into today. These are stories that are still told in schools, read by grandparents to grandchildren, but they were stories that back in the 1950s were new to us. They came in a format called golden books. I wonder if you had some. You may have some in your house today to share with the young people in your life. This is one I have called the Little Red Hen. See, it's golden binding. I thought it was an interesting idea that these books would be called golden. Golden implies filled with wealth, filled with truth, pure, light. And so it was interesting what was in the stories. But as we mature, as we live through our lives, and as we study ourselves, and we study each other, and we study other cultures and other worlds, the stories of our youth expand and grow. And another thing I'd like to do today is connect you with the themes of these stories and how they changed as perhaps we began to study and understand more and more about our Unitarian principles. So let's begin. The first story, The Little Red Hen. This is a classic story about work. And he who works, or she who works, eats. But there's some subtleties in this story that you might not particularly buy into in today's time. For example, in the story of the Little Red Hen, when she discovers the grain of wheat and she elects to plant it, she invites others to help. Not I, they say, not I. But let's look closely at what the other characters were doing. These two characters that said not I were soldiering. Do we value soldiering? This character was fishing. Not I, said the cat. But he's also providing sustenance for us. He's catching fish. Not I, said the little pig, who was playing the violin. So as we look at this story that was brought to us in our youth, did we recognize the value of the actions of the other characters? As the story proceeds, Little Red Hen works hard. She digs a hole. She plants that seed. And again she asks, who will help me? Not I, not I, say each of the characters. But each of the characters are doing something. In this instance, the cat is a bug catcher. He's studying the bugs. He's studying actually the butterflies. Do we not value that? Do we not value what the studier of butterflies offers to us? And the pig now is playing the flute. Quite a versatile pig, if you ask me. And so the story proceeds to when the little red hen takes the wheat to the mill. And still, these characters continue to engage in other activities. She bakes the bread. She sits down to eat it. Now, of course, she will not allow these other characters to eat the bread. When I was a child and read this story and had it read to me, there was no question in my mind what it was telling me. It was saying work, and only those who work should benefit from the labors of my work. And I wonder about that as I grow older. And I wondered about it as I took on and understood more about being a citizen of the world, a studier of the world. And I began to see that in my understanding, everyone contributes. There's an inherent worth and dignity to all kinds of contributions. I wouldn't want a world that didn't have music. And I certainly depend on soldiering. No question about it. I don't want to just eat bread. Well, maybe I do want to just eat bread, but that probably wouldn't be a really good idea. Now, the second story that I remember from my childhood that I'd like to help you think with me a bit about was, I think, a particularly influential one. Maybe you remember this one, Scuffy the Tugboat. Now, the thing with the Scuffy story that absolutely fascinates me is how it was designed mostly to make us stay in our place. Do you remember? See if I can help you. Here we go. So Scuffy was a little red tugboat. He was in a toy store. Now, what's interesting about this story, and I think it was purposeful, is that he did not live with a family. He lived in a toy store, and it was the man with the polka dot tie, and the little boy who took him from his store and began to introduce him to the world. A man with a polka dot tie. Older man, a little boy. I think it's interesting that it's not a family. And sometimes when we think we get everything we need to know from our families, it's good for us to understand that there are other teachers out there in life for us. Now, in the story, they put Scuffy in the tub, and he goes round and round in the tub. Well, he's finally in water, so he's testing himself, so to speak. But he finds that it wasn't enough. And so one day, they take him and put him in a little stream. But sometimes adults do misjudge. And sometimes they put a child or an individual or student into something that's bigger than perhaps they were ready for. Now, we don't want to throw fault at people that put us in circumstances we're not ready for. Heavens knows who could have gotten ready for the circumstances we're in today. Who would have ever known that we would spend so much time in our homes and so much time alone with our own thoughts and our own personalities? But maybe we can learn from it. Just like Scuffy, we might go out and see the cows, at least in our own mind. We would visit our television programs. Maybe we'd read something we wouldn't normally do. And heaven knows how many of us thought we would actually spend so much time doing something called Zooming. I had no concept this would happen. But we're learning. I've learned how to use it a little better than originally, and I hope today that I'm not too boring for you. So Scuffy got away from the man with the polka dot tie and the little boy, and he went out into the big, wide, wonderful world. And as he did, Scuffy saw the things that people did. At night, it was very scary. He heard the hoot of the owl. Scuffy was afraid, but he persisted. Sometimes you don't have any choice but to persist. In this story, the water flowed along, just like water will, just like life will, and you have to persist. So there's no question that in this story, persistence was the role model that was being offered to the listener. You stick to it. You take adventures. You hang in there. And when you're afraid, you flow with the river and move along. Scuffy went through towns and he saw a log jam. This really dates this book, but I don't think it's totally unlike a big traffic jam on the interstate, is it? We flow along and we learn. He went through big cities. He was excited. But then suddenly he saw before him the big ocean. Now here's where it gets really, really interesting. Should Scuffy have pulled out through the port, through the big, bustling port of life into the wide ocean? A fear of the unknown is always part of who we are. And in these simple books, children were asked to confront that. And when you read a story, or look at a story, or revisit a story from your youth, it's probably very good to take a moment and say, what is the symbol here? What's happening? Now, in our search for truth as Unitarian Universalists, we wind and weave our way out of the bathtub, out of the simple story of the bathtub, through all the trials and tribulations of life. We experience what others do and how others are. Some are scary, some are interesting, some we might get bumped, like the logs bumped Scuffy, or we might hear strange hooting, howl sounds that scare us a little bit. Maybe parts of our own spiritual discovery will scare us, maybe more than a little. But when you see the big wide ocean, this is the true test of who you are as a person. It's that golden lesson. Can I do it? Do I want to do it? Will I do it? Should I do it? Or do I have any choice about doing it? Well, for Scuffy, his salvation came. His mentor, the man with the polka dot tie, and the little boy grabbed him up just exactly as he was ready to go into that big ocean. Is that the ocean of truth? Is it the ocean of life? We don't know. But you know what? They put Scuffy back in that bathtub. And he went round and round in circles, repeating and repeating. Unfortunately, Scuffy said to himself, "This is the place for me." Well, you know, as I do searching for spiritual growth, as I speak with others about it, as I sit in my book groups, reading books that are way beyond my capacity to comprehend, like the big wide ocean of knowledge, the big wide ocean of spiritual investigation, I'm not sure which is the place for me. I don't think it's a bathtub going round and round in circles. But I also am very glad there's a few folks around with a couple of polka dot ties to snatch me up if I'm getting out into something deeper than I could handle. And that's our search for truth as Unitarian Universalists. Now, this book, of course, we could not talk about golden lessons if we did not consider this very book that's in my hand. This was not part of the Golden Book series, but it was a very, very important part of who we were as people in that period of time. And I think in today's world, it's extremely important to think about this lesson. You know, we always are quoting Mr. Rogers today. Mr. Rogers said, "When you're afraid, look for the helpers." I also think it's important to look for the determiners, people who operate with determination. They persist, they don't give up. They may be very small. They may be that one little bagger at the grocery store who takes the extra time to tie your bag shut for you so your groceries don't end up all over your back seat. It might be that mail carrier who helps you carry that dog food right into the house instead of leaving it just at the back door. And it might be that neighbor who every morning wants that text from you to know that you're safe. These are the helpers. These are the persisters. And so, of course, we have to look at the little engine that could. This was a story that was so important at its time, which was in the early 50s, late 40s, early 50s. And I think it's a story that is particularly poignant today. You know, in this story, if you remember it, there were engines that were way, way more important than the little engine that could. Engines that could have stepped up and done something. Instead, they did not. On to important, they said. So let's look at the story. So the children were waiting for their presents. The children were waiting for their food. But the train had broken down. The circus was waiting there too. The joy, the fun of life were waiting. Along came a big silver engine, a big golden engine. They said, "Will you help? Will you help?" "Me? I can't help you. I'm much too important for that. I have important work to do." Oh dear, we cannot help the children. Then along came a big, strong engine. "I can't help," says he. "I am too strong. I am too big. This action of pulling this train over the mountain with those toys, with those joys of life. Well, I just can't do that. I'm much too strong for that." And so it was so sad because it could not happen. Things could not get over the mountain to the children. Then along came the little blue engine. It was a very little engine. Notice, very little. Very little things can make a very big difference. They truly can. I think one of the reasons that I was always so fascinated by stories about little things, because I'm a very little person too. I often thought I couldn't do very much. Off went the little blue engine. "I think I can," he said. "I think I can." And of course, we know how the story ends. "I know I can. I know I can." And the little blue engine was able to carry the joys and the toys over that big, insurmountable mountain. Insurmountable. "I know I can. I know I can." Persist, persist, persist. And so it happened. They made it over the mountain and down the other side. So the fun, the joys, the games, the toys, the food were all brought to the children. Now, persistence is something that Unitarian Universalists know a lot about. We know about that long arm that bends towards justice. We know about the fact that we have to work hard to make things happen. But we also know it's the little ones, the little things, the daily things that count. The moments that we take to say thank you, to demonstrate kindness. The moments we take to write a letter or pick up a phone or pick up a piece of trash or help a hurt animal. We are cut out of that cloth. So I suppose that the stories that we've learned here, that the stories that were our golden lessons of our youth, the stories that were embedded in our psyches as we were growing into our young adults, into our age, into the times we pass these stories on to others. These are truly, truly golden lessons. But golden lessons ameliorated by what we've learned by growth from our hearts and our minds and our spirits. Never forget that a story speaks to you, but you also bring to the story who you are and what you are seeking and what you are looking for. And the golden lesson from that story may take years and years and years to mature. One thing I would ask you to do, take a few moments to think a little bit about a story from your childhood, something that you had read to you over and over again, perhaps something that you now read to children in your life, and think about the golden lesson in that story. Is it a lesson that was complete as it stood? Or was that golden lesson something that grew and grew in your life? It took on depth, it took on power, and today you know that the basic lesson was there, but that there was much, much more to it, and much, much more brought to it by you as you grew and you learned. And may your spirituality and intellectual analysis and your love of others and your kindness deliver golden lessons throughout your beingness. Take care, my friends. This is a tough time too, but the stories will help us, and the lessons we learn will stay with us and with our children for a very long time. Namaste.